An exciting but important Fujifilm firmware update. Hi everyone, welcome to Pal to Tech. Today Fujifilm launched a firmware update for the following cameras: the X-H2 and X-H2S, the X-T5, the XS20, and the X106. Also, there's been an update for the GF 80mm f1.7 lens as well. So let's start with the most fun, a new Fujifilm film simulation, Reala Ace. It is so cool when you update the camera because boom, it appears right in the menu. For those of you that have not used it before, Reala Ace is a bit less saturated than Provia. It's a little more saturated than classic chrome, and it's got kind of an edgier tonality to it than Pro Negative High. I do think that Reala Ace renders skin tones among the best of any Fujifilm film simulation under normal shooting conditions. Regardless of what you're shooting, this new film simulation is a very much welcome update to these cameras. And as to why it's not been added to older models such as the X-T4, X-T3, and so forth, I can only assume that this film simulation needed compatibility with that 5th generation X processor that's been included in the newer cameras. The next category is very important: autofocus bug fixes and improvements. When I first got the X-T5 and did the review of the camera, I noticed that when you put the camera in AFC while you're using face-eye auto detect during burst shooting, or any kind of subject detection for that matter, the little green square would light up telling you that you've nailed focus. But when you brought the images into Lightroom or Photoshop or Capture One and you looked at them, you would actually see that the camera was generating a false positive, meaning that when the square was green, it didn't necessarily nail the eye. It nailed focus on something else. Now, for myself, when I tested this, I didn't notice it to be as big of a problem with human subjects, but I did notice it when I set the camera to animal detect, AFC, and continuous high burst shooting. However, since the camera was released, and particularly since a firmware update was done in April of this year, a number of users have reported similar issues to that face-eye autofocus not working properly when you had the camera in AFC. And so with today's firmware update for the X-H2, X-H2S, X-T5, and the XS20, this problem should now be resolved. In fact, just about an hour ago, I took the X-T5 camera with the new firmware update added to it back to the same location with the same subjects and the same exact settings and the same lens that I had used initially when I ran into that problem. Well, almost the same subjects. This is a new Shetland sheepdog who's only a puppy, but he definitely can run fast, and it is a great test for this camera. So as you can see him running down right now, you see the green square, bam, 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 it's hitting it. So let's take a look at the images. These are the shots that I got in order as the dog is moving down toward the camera. And there were a few misses, no doubt about it. But as he got closer, interestingly enough, it nailed it every single time, which it did not do as well before I had the firmware update. I remember that very clearly. I mean, nailed it, nailed it, nailed it, nailed it, nailed it. I think he sneezed right here. Have a look at this. Now, let me be the first to tell you, this firmware came out just this morning. I clearly have not had a full amount of time to put it through a full battery of tests, which I'm sure many of you will be doing. But at the very least, with what I could do in time for this video, I do think they've addressed the issue. Have they addressed it enough? Only time will tell, and of course, your feedback. And lastly, we have fixes for several situations where the camera would just freeze up, and one of these just drove me absolutely crazy. So first, the AF Illuminator light metering freeze bug has been resolved for all cameras being updated today. This freeze occurred if the shutter button was half pressed down while using the AF Illuminator light metering function. For the X-T5, XS20, and the X106, if you were recording video to, say, an external monitor using a 16:9 4K 60p resolution and a compression setting of H.264/422 in the .mov container format, and you had IBIS and DIS both enabled, and your HDMI output display setting was on, the camera would often freeze up. This was the #1 problem for me personally, as I use those settings all the time for the channel. And it made me just want to toss the monitor and the camera across the room. Okay, let's move on. For the X100 cameras, if you use the built-in ND filter, the camera would sometimes freeze. That's now been fixed. And for the XH2, if you were shooting at 1080 HD and 16:9 movie format, and you had OIS and DIS enabled, and then you went like this with the camera, I'm not kidding, black edges would appear on the sides of the screen. That's now been fixed. Also, for the XH2, if you would press down the shutter button quickly, right? Not halfway, but boom, press it down quickly. There was one combination of settings that would cause that camera to just freeze up. You had to have it in continuous high. You had to also, you know what, I'm not gonna go through every single combination you had to have that problem happen. Go see the firmware update page where it'll explain that for you. I will leave a link in the description down below this video. And finally, for all cameras in today's firmware update, Fujifilm also fixes what they call a minor bug. I was not able to find out what those are, but a minor bug has now been fixed. Regarding the GF 80mm f1.7 lens update, this added improvements and bug fixes for the focus ring. I will have links to all of the updates and instructions on how to install them in the description down below this video. Above all else though, I hope that today's update does fix the AFC face-eye autofocus issue that was present on X-T5 and XH cameras. As always, I'm sure we're going to hear more feedback about this in the days to come. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you found today's video helpful, or at least entertaining. And if you did, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. I will be seeing you in a new video very soon. Take care.